He did it again, folks. Once Lance Barton took Georgia on the money line, I knew the Irish were going to cruise in this one. He does it every time. He's a fan of the pod.
I'm over two. I'm over two against you, bro. You should have known that I was just doing the old emotional hedge there, trying to help my partner out to get your Irish a victory.
Yes, sir. And they did get that victory in the Sugar Bowl. It was a day late, so we're podcasting a day late here, getting to you. All the big bowls are in. None of the bye week teams won. Everyone's making excuses about buys. We're going to talk about it all. We're going to kick off with, obviously, the Sugar Bowl, but this is Always Talk Ball. Tyler Noe, Lance Barton. Sugar Bowl just wrapped up about 45 minutes ago. Notre Dame comes away with a 23-10 victory over the Georgia Bulldogs. It was an ugly game, ugly first half. Turnovers for Georgia were killer in the first half. Fumble inside the red zone, and then a fumble inside their own 20 right after Notre Dame kicked a field goal to go up 6-3. Notre Dame immediately pounces on it, and next play, touchdown. And then right after that, they talk about the middle eight. In this game, it was like the middle one.
Yeah.
And Notre Dame put up 17 points in about 58 seconds of game time because they took the kickoff back to open the second half. Georgia made it, cut it to 20-10, but their offense without Carson Beck and the downfield threat, Gunnar Stockton played well. They just couldn't get a lot going in the offense. And, I think even with Beck, they probably would have struggled, but it was I'm going to say like an ugly masterclass. How about that? Ugly masterclass for Notre Dame.
Yeah. I mean, they won, how they basically won games all year, running the football, being methodical on offense, defense, winning the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, but especially on the defensive side, and making plays on special teams. And all three phases of the game, Notre Dame won the matchup. Notre Dame, like you said, wasn't pretty on offense, but I just think it got to the point to where at some point, like, there was no reason to try to really attack. And the best way for Georgia to get back into that game and to have a huge momentum swing would be for their defense to, like they did against Texas multiple times, for Jalen Walker to come off the edge and get a strip sack on Riley Leonard, just like Notre Dame did to Gunnar Stockton there at the end of the first half. That was the easiest way for Georgia to try to get back in that thing. And Notre Dame made sure they kept it with a quick passing game, safe passes as well, running the football.
It was pretty similar to when they got up by a couple scores against Indiana.
Yeah, it was. And Riley Leonard managed that game phenomenally. Like I know the term game manager gets like knocked for whatever reason. Coaches, I promise you, would love a quarterback that can truly manage the game really well. And Riley Leonard has done that back-to-back games, the Indiana game and this one, and he's made plays. And like we've talked about multiple times throughout the year, he's just a dog, man. Like, he's a tough, hard-nosed kid and runs his butt off. Not afraid of contact. And, man, at one point during that game, you texted, you're like, yeah, James Franklin just sitting back on the couch with an extra 48 hours of rest while these two teams are just beating the crap out of each other. And they were. There were some pads popping early in this game. And it continued. But man, just look, it's okay. You can be unbiased for a second. Like, how happy are you right now, bro, that your Irish are literally in the Final Four and they just took down Kirby Smart in Georgia?
Pretty happy. Pretty dang happy, man. I told you I've had a lot of highs as a Notre Dame fan, but there's also been a lot of lows.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of just gotten used to over the years. Like, if they lost this game, it was just going to kind of be another notch on the belt there. It was just kind of wasn't going to surprise anyone if Notre Dame lost the game. What was going to surprise people is if Notre Dame went in to the Sugar Dome and
Sugar Dome. That's
Sugar Dome. Yeah.
Honestly, the Sugar Dome sounds better.
Yeah, Super Dome. What was going to surprise people if they went in there and they went toe to toe with Georgia? And honestly, I texted you. They looked like they had. It was pretty even on the talent. They just, honestly, man, Marcus Freeman outcoached Kirby Smart, and Notre Dame executed much, much better. And that was a trend in a lot of the games in the quarterfinals versus, with the team. There probably is something to be said for teams playing last week, obviously with the wear and tear on their body, but getting that game speed. And a lot of those teams came out in the first quarter, in the first half, like Texas yesterday, just blitzing the team who had a bye until Arizona State game speed caught up to them a little bit. They kind of get in a little rhythm. So there maybe is something a little bit said for that bye week, but I never thought, gosh, props to Marcus Freeman, man. Like, what are we doing? We're sitting here 3.5 months ago after they're losing to Northern Illinois, or 4 months ago, losing to Northern Illinois, and I'm sitting here saying the team fooled everybody again after that win over A&M, and Marcus Freeman's got problems in games like that, and he just can't get it done. And I mean, props to him, props to the whole coaching staff, the whole team. That was a big win.
Yeah, it was. It's the biggest win for Notre Dame. I mean, I really can't remember when. You and I were talking about it before we started recording. I really can't remember when, that as far as the biggest win for Notre Dame. And like, what does this mean for Notre Dame? You and I talked about this. I called you a couple of days ago, and I made this kind of like statement about this game. I said, you just kind of made the point. If Georgia goes out and wins this game, most of the country would just look at this and be like, "Oh yeah, that's what's supposed to happen." Notre Dame loses a big game to Kirby Smart and to Georgia, and we just moved on from it and wouldn't have thought anything of it, type deal. But Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame wins this game. How much it could be a just huge like catapult for this Notre Dame football program going forward as far as recruiting. Like, he's already recruiting really well.
Yeah, I think it shows that Marcus Freeman obviously I've been saying it for 3 years now, much better recruiter than Brian Kelly was in Notre Dame. And I think it also shows that we've been saying it for a couple of years now, but especially this year, this Georgia team was not a typical Georgia team they've been in the past 7 years. And again, the NIL and the portal and the parity it's created. And you could tell, like watching that game, that Notre Dame has caught up to the likes of Georgia, and they had caught up a couple of years ago, but they just couldn't get it done against Clemson in the playoffs in 2022 or whatever. So
I mean, physically at the line of scrimmage, I mean, Notre Dame was absolutely like, this was like, I overheard, I can't remember which analyst it was. It might have been Jordan Rogers that was talking about it on ESPN before the game, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, when Notre Dame played Alabama back in like whatever that was, 2012 national championship game. Brian Kelly left that game and was like, we got to get a lot better on the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
And Notre Dame has been that way for a while now. They've been ready to go up against the Kirby Smarts, or if Nick Saban were still coaching, the Nick Saban Alabama type teams. You're real physically imposing teams on the line of scrimmage that normally overwhelm teams at the line of scrimmage. Notre Dame has been able to handle that for a while now, and it definitely showed tonight. And what's even more impressive, dude, about Notre Dame, about this, you haven't made excuses about it. Marcus Freeman hasn't made excuses about it. I haven't heard really anybody from Notre Dame making excuses about it. All of the injuries, man, like, I've probably made more excuses for you about it for Notre Dame. They just guys keep dropping like flies. And it's just it really is just next man up.
And some of their better players too.
Oh, yeah. We're not talking about like some of their best overall players. I mean, Benjamin Morrison not even playing.
Even in this game, Jeremiah Love and Howard Cross both go down.
Yeah, that's literally two of their like 4 or 5 best players on their entire team. I saw Xavier Watts, get banged up in this game. And they don't use it as excuses. And what's more impressive about it is Notre Dame does not take on tons of transfers. Not even no way near as much as a lot of these other teams. So it tells me that obviously they're evaluating talent really, really well, and they're developing that talent really well.
Yeah.
And so
the transfers they do take in, Bo Collins from Clemson catches the touchdown pass in the second quarter. RJ Oben from Duke blitzes. They tore up that left tackle from Georgia all night.
Yeah, they did.
Forces the fumble before the Bo Collins touchdown. And then your boy from Fairhope, Alabama.
Yep.
From Duke, Riley Leonard.
Little Hallmark town in South Alabama.
Yeah, and he's just like he's not going to put up 300 yards passing, right? He's going to get it any way he can. He's going to hurdle guys and land on his helmet on a 3rd down and 6, getting a first down. he's really, like, after the game, like Marcus Freeman just said, he's going to do any means possible to try to win the game.
Again, we don't have it in front of us. We're recording this pretty soon after that game. But I would love to go back and look when the last time, or if it's ever happened, that Kirby Smart Georgia team lost a game where a team had under 300 total yards.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know, did they even have 250 total yards, Notre Dame?
213.
Wow, 244. 244 total yards for Notre Dame.
Oh, for Notre Dame, 244, yeah.
Yeah, 244. And still won the game.
Yep.
That just tells you again how Notre Dame just physically was able to hold up against Georgia. Not only hold up, but again, in that fourth quarter, they're sitting there running the clock out. Just Georgia knows they're going to run the football. Notre Dame's just running over them.
I mean, it just was like a 6 or 7 minute drive there at the end of the game.
Yeah, it was. On the flip side of it, I just want to mention, like, Gunnar Stockton, he definitely represented himself well tonight. For that to be his first start in college football against that defense, to be under duress like he was, his offensive line gave him not much help at all. There was zero help from the running game. Notre Dame just completely shut down the running game for Georgia. I think they averaged, like, around 2 yards a carry?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they completely shut down the run game. And then he's got receivers that are just dropping balls again, just like they have all year long. So, and he still went like 20 for 32 for 200-something yards and a touchdown. He played really well. I think the future's bright with him. I think he's the type of quarterback that Kirby Smart really likes. So,
yeah, Georgia's not going anywhere.
No, they're not. They're not. They'll retool. They're going to. I promise you one thing. They're going to get some receivers. They're going to get some receivers in this offseason.
Yeah, they have to. And the crazy thing about this game was, too, the fact that I think if this game is played, this exact game right here is played 10 times, Notre Dame probably wins 8 of them, like with the way they play.
And look, man, I'm going to bring up another point. I don't mean to tell on you here, but I'm going to. You told me this on the phone here recently and said that you just didn't want to say it on the podcast because
didn't put it on the record.
You didn't want to put it on the record because you didn't want to have to eat your words. But number two, like, you just how people kind of view Notre Dame going into this game, like around the country, that if you were to come out and say what you said to me on the phone, and I didn't disagree, I told you, I was like, I honestly don't disagree with you. Mm-hmm. You said, I think Notre Dame's a better football team.
Yeah.
Like this year. Like, I know that to some people that sounds crazy. Obviously, it doesn't anymore after the game we just watched. But this year's Georgia team was just not the same Georgia team. That's not taking anything away from Notre Dame. Yep. They just weren't the same Georgia team that we've seen from these, not even a shell of the same Georgia team that we've seen from the previous years. They still had dudes on that defensive front like Jalen Walker, Michael Williams, and Brinson. They still had dudes that could get after you up front. But the offensive line wasn't anywhere near as good. They didn't have a Ladd McConkey. They didn't have a Brock Bowers, who are both balling out in the NFL right now. They just didn't have those guys. They didn't have the running backs that they've usually had. And I mean, I don't disagree, man. Obviously now they proved it.
Yeah.
Like, I think I agree. If they play 10 times, Notre Dame wins that game more than Georgia does.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I got to bring this up. You're going to get mad at me, but
that's okay.
I got some people texting me, especially our guy Ryan, big IU fan.
About the SEC?
He wants to know Lance's thoughts on the big bad SEC now.
I'm glad he texted you that.
To his point,
it's time.
Yeah, I mean, since the Penn State SMU game, right, and maybe a little bit of the Texas Clemson game, but I'm not sure there's been a conference and more. And this, I'm saying this with the fact that I know the SEC is still great, everybody, okay, but there's not been a conference, I guess, having lost more traction than the SEC has since that Ohio State-Tennessee game. Obviously, what's happened in the bowl games, what nearly happened in Atlanta yesterday, which we're going to talk about next. But people are asking Lance, like, he wants to know what's up with the big bad SEC.
All right, man, I'm going to pull a Josh Pate here that you can go back into the episode and clip it on 1, 2, 3. Okay, so the term, if you're able to dish it out, that you got to be able to take it. There's nobody that dishes out more smack talk, including myself, in college football as far as conference-like supremacy and trying to rep a conference than the SEC. It's been going on for a really long time. And here in the first year of the 12-team playoff, you had the 3 teams that didn't get in to the college football playoff. and all the talk surrounding that, how they should have been in, and how there should be more SEC teams just because they're in the SEC and they play a much tougher schedule, and there's so much more. Like there's the best teams in the country are all in the SEC, so on, so on, so on. And then they come out here in this bowl season and in this college football playoff and just embarrass themselves. And I mean, Texas is the team now carrying the flag for the SEC.
And they hate that.
Whomst would have thunk it,
Yeah.
Josh Pate. But yeah, as I'll say it, us as SEC fans, there's nobody that's excited about that. The fact that Texas is the one now carrying the flag here and going into this Final Four for the SEC.
And now they got to play Ohio State, and more than likely, you're not going to see. I mean, unless Texas pulls the upset, you're not going to see an SEC team in the first 12-team playoff championship.
No. And look, it's still a great conference, and there's still the best talent in the country and all that stuff. Like this bowl season doesn't, get rid of that, but it absolutely does raise the red flag and puts the Southeastern Conference and our fans on notice that the NIL world and the transfer portal has absolutely closed the gap. It just has. I know some people have been making jokes. Well, now that everybody can pay their players, that it's a lot more even now. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that NIL and the transfer portal has absolutely it's leveled the playing field more. Some of these SEC teams, like again, your Alabamas, your Georgias, they don't have first string, second string, third string, fourth string like they used to, of just 5-star talent sitting there waiting 3 years to wait for the next man up for their turn to play. They're going other places to get an opportunity to play immediately. And some of them are going to these other teams in these other conferences. And then on top of that, you've got teams like you said, like a Notre Dame, who does recruit well and develops well and has a really good coaching staff, and they take 3 or 4 little spots like, man, you know what? We need a quarterback. So let's go get this dog in Riley Leonard. We need another receiver. Let's go get this cat that catches a touchdown here in the Georgia game, like you said. We need another edge rusher. Let's go get this guy from Duke, who was a really good edge rusher at Duke last year. You get 3 or 4 guys to piece it together. And yeah, so my message to all my fellow SEC fans and friends, look, we all dish it out. Take the medicine. Take the medicine and just deal with it right now.
Yeah. We're going to have all off season to talk about it, but it's going to be interesting just going into next year. Kind of just
got choked up a little bit. Got a cough. Hang on.
this storyline here, because I think if they had gone out and Ole Miss looks like they're probably going to take care of business against Duke tonight. Alabama,
they should have been in the playoff.
Yeah, Alabama and South Carolina losing. I think if they would have gone out and just kind of dominated their games, Georgia and Texas, make it to the semifinals, maybe even the championship game, meet up for a third time. Like, obviously, you could have said, see, we told you. Now it's kind of just like, okay, maybe you weren't right. Like, obviously, there's other teams. I know what Ryan's getting at. He wants an apology. He wants an apology to everybody who crapped all over Indiana for losing to Ohio State and Indiana and went out and beat Michigan. And, I know they didn't beat anybody, great, but it's just they want their voices to be heard too.
Can I ask? I'm honest. I don't remember. I don't think that I did. Like we were kind of like at one point. I think we had people messaging.
Apology from us. We were the biggest IU fans.
I was going to say we had people messaging us wanting to know if we were an Indiana podcast at one point earlier this year.
Yeah,
and we had people messaging us wanting to know if we were a Penn State podcast at one point this year. So we've been fair to everybody, but anybody that listens to this show knows that my allegiance. That I'm an Alabama fan and graduated from the University of Alabama. So of course we're fans just like everybody else.
Yeah,
but I think we do a pretty dang good job of covering this from a non-biased perspective and just talking about the sport in general. I know sometimes I come across as the biggest bammer there is, and I get it. I get why somebody would think that. But at the end of the day, Notre Dame just went into the heart of the South and just punked Georgia in, as you call it, the Sugar Dome. And so, and to Ryan's point, and to any Indiana fan, I'd have a bad taste in my mouth too, that Like, okay, I would want to know, is Kirk Herbstreit going to come on Twitter tonight and do a live hit on X and say that Georgia didn't belong for losing by double digits to Notre Dame like that?
Yeah.
If I was an Indiana fan, I would want that. I would get
Yeah.
that. I would understand that. So again, take the medicine. All of the trash that's been talked, got to eat it.
Yeah.
Got to eat it.
What a beautiful sport, man. What a beautiful sport.
Beautifully flawed sport.
Fans included. All right, let's move on.
Yeah.
What was probably the most exciting game of the weekend?
Oh, not probably. It easily was.
And it had the biggest spread. The Peach Bowl, Texas takes down Arizona State in double overtime, 39-31. I told you we were talking about the Peach Bowl and the Fiesta Bowl. We just got done with Fiesta Bowl. I said, I think this Arizona State game has a much better chance of being an outright upset.
You did.
Than the Boise State game. And man, Arizona State came super close. I got to be. Were you rooting for Arizona State in that game?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I became a fan just like everybody else.
Yeah.
The David versus Goliath type stuff. I mean, I think Andy Staples actually did put out a thing on X and voted for people to vote. Said if you're a non-Texas, if you're not a fan of Texas, and you see this, please vote yes or no. Are you pulling for Arizona State in this second half right now?
Yeah.
100%. It was like thousands of votes. It was like 100%. So I was.
Yeah. Quick synopsis of the game. Arizona State starts slow. Texas starts fast. 2-play drive, touchdown, punt return, touchdown. Before you know it, you're like, man, this game's going to be a blowout. Got 2 hours to kill till the Rose Bowl, which is almost assuredly going to be an awesome game. And, man, 17-3 at halftime. Arizona State's defense actually played pretty well in the first half after that first drive. Defense gets a safety. They kind of hang in there with a field goal. Their offense turned into Texas when they played Georgia, when they got in the red zone. And they just couldn't get in. I think they had 3 red zone trips and 3 points out of that.
Dude, for how good Kenny Dillingham and Marcus Arroyo are on calling, they were piss poor play calling inside the red. They just kept running into the teeth of that Texas front.
I just think they were. I mean, we said it was a bad matchup for Arizona State, and that was not a lie. The game obviously was a lot closer than that, but I just don't think when the field narrowed down there and they had less room to move, I don't think they thought they had many options.
Yeah, I guess they didn't trust the pass. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, because obviously, the very last play of the game, Sam Levitt throws a pick, when they're trying to tie the game up in overtime. So, but it went to 24-8 in the fourth quarter with the gutsy Quinn Ewers touchdown run, and then it just turned into the Cam Scattaboo show.
Did it not?
Dude throws a touchdown pass on a fourth down. Catches one on a beautiful play where he looked like a wide receiver, just kind of giving a little shove to the cornerback or the linebacker.
And they called pass interference on Texas. I was like, what? But still,
and a face mask too. He got his helmet ripped off, and he's just standing there looking like an absolute beast. That dude left it all out on the field. He was puking and rallying on New Year's Day better than anybody. Dude, and he just it was unbelievable to watch.
So, as college basketball fans like we are, and like a lot of people probably listening to this are, you always have every year March Madness, you have those players from the smaller teams that you remember for a very long time, forever, that just have those one shining moments in March Madness and just really just capture, capture everybody's hearts in March Madness and stuff. That was Cam Scattaboo.
Yeah.
In this, people years from now, way down the road, will remember the performance of Cam Scattaboo against Texas in the Sugar Bowl. They will. And if they would have pulled off the upset, you would have remembered some of the plays even more so in this game, kind of like the Boise Statue of Liberty play and the flea flicker type play for Boise years ago against Oklahoma. That's the type of stuff that we were getting with this Arizona State team in the second half against Texas. But let's go back to early in the game. When you are such a big underdog, you kind of have that nothing to lose mentality. We're here to play to win. I know hindsight's 20/20, but I don't think he should have done anything different, by the way. I'm just saying, I wonder what happens in this game, how this game goes any different if Arizona State decides to kick a field goal, some of those field goals early in the game instead of going for it like they did. I know Arizona State's kicking game has been like at one point Kenny Dillingham was openly talking about in press conferences this year. We're holding tryouts. You think I'm joking? Like seriously, if you can kick, send our whatever messages and like emails. Here's our email address. Like,
Yeah.
So their kicking game has been bad all year. I don't fault them. Like, and I'm not trying to say after the fact. Like, but it just shows you like if they weren't such big underdogs in this game, would they have done it different? I don't know. But if they're kicking field goals early in that game and making them, like the end of that game might have been different.
Yeah. When you look at the stat sheet, dude, Arizona State dominated this game.
Dominated. Up and down the field the whole game, bro.
Took it to them.
And Texas couldn't run the football at all.
That was one of the most shocking things. I kept texting you. I was like, I just cannot believe Texas cannot run the ball. They can't get any push with their offensive line.
Yeah.
And on that game was different than Georgia Notre Dame. You could clearly see a size difference between Texas offensive line and Arizona State defensive line.
Yeah, and it just shows again, like we've talked about here before, that everybody, when they think of these great offensive coaches, you think of just slinging it all over the place and high flying. Sark's offenses, when they're the most successful, is when they run the football. Their most poor performances this year offensively, the 2 games against Georgia, this game against Arizona State, they don't run the football well. And again, another performance, too, where there were multiple times during the game where Quinn Ewers leaves you with wanting more, with more to be desired. But then at the same time, in that second half, Texas is sitting at home right now if it's not for Quinn Ewers. I mean, he made some big-time plays in that second half, like the touchdown run that you talked about. And then, dude, that fourth down pass that just drops it out of the sky like a little teardrop right into the hands of the receiver there for a touchdown. And
yeah, I bet Arizona State wishes they had that one back.
Right. Hindsight again, want to talk about as soon as they lined up in the little like just cover 0, we're sending the house type deal.
Yeah, I think they blitzed 6.
It's like, okay, but when you do that, you better get back. And obviously, Texas had the right call for it. They were going to try to beat them over the top, and they did. And obviously, we got to bring it up, man. I hate that we're even like having to discuss it, but like we have to. I think you disagree with me on it, but man, I've never seen a play in college football where that's not targeting. I get it by the letter of the law. You didn't attack with the crown of the helmet, whatever, but it's no longer just the crown of the helmet. It's forcible contact to a defenseless player to the head or neck area. I'm personally glad it didn't end on that. And who knows if it ends on that. They get a 15-yard penalty. There's still over a minute to go. Texas could have sacked Leavitt, or Arizona State could have had a holding penalty to knock him out. You never know. But I got to be honest. If I'm trying my best here to be non-biased on it and not be like, well, it was a football play, hit him with his face mask and all that, I understand that. But if I was an Arizona State fan, I'd be sitting here at this microphone beating the crap out of this computer, screaming and hollering that is targeting. And the fact that gets called every time in college football. I just think that the Zebras, honestly, were scared to death to make that call in that situation instead of making the right call. That's just how I feel about it.
Yeah, I don't think it was targeting, but I'm with you. I think it's called nearly 100% of the time.
Yeah.
I thought it was more of a football play than either 1 or 2 possessions earlier when Ewers launched the ball downfield. Arizona State picked it off, and they reviewed a targeting on that play, which you texted and you said it's lucky it's not targeting because it was Isaiah Bond. I think he was jumping in air for the ball.
Yeah.
And the other Arizona State guy, I mean, he launched himself into it. And Matt Austin says he hit him like kind of in the body of the chest. I mean, he hit him pretty good in the head. And
he did.
That wasn't a targeting. So I'm like, if they're not calling that a targeting and wiping away that interception, then there's no way they're gonna call this one.
It's just targeting. Targeting and pass interference in college football is just like nobody knows. Like what nobody knows which one which is
they're
which.
all judgment calls. Yeah,
they are. And another story for another day. But they do need to have different levels of targeting. Absolutely, the Michael Taft hit was not an egregious. That was a football play, and that should not be the same. If they ruled it targeting, that shouldn't be the same as like launching into a defenseless player and getting ejected and all that kind of stuff. That shouldn't be. But either way, it didn't get called, and Texas ended up making the plays needed to be made. I kind of think it was a ball don't lie scenario when the kicker for Texas, Bert Auburn, missed that field goal and doinked it off the upright.
Yeah. I don't know how he missed that after Sark just almost, made out with him there in the on the field, like trying to pump him up and
The
everything.
tweet from Taylor Lewan from Bussin' with the Boys when it showed Sark sitting there smiling, holding his face, and he goes, "Has to be the worst speech of all time." And it had like millions of views and retweets and stuff. Hilarious.
Yeah.
But no, man, valiant effort by old Kenny D in Arizona State. Again, without the 12-team playoff, I know Arizona State, like teams like that, I think you agree with this. Like your Cinderella teams and your teams like in Arizona State, a Boise this year, even in Indiana, like this year, those teams aren't winning 4 games and winning a national championship. It's not happening in football. This isn't college basketball. It's not happening. But we wouldn't get the stories that we got this year with Cam Scatterbo, with Kenny Dillingham. People wouldn't be as familiar with them as they are after that game. Arizona State's program is going to, I think it was Bud Elliott that was talking about it from Cover 3, that the programs like in Indiana, like in Arizona State, like a Boise, the amount of money that this created and funding that this created for those programs, from boosters, from college football playoff money, all of that. This just helped these football programs going forward and making them an upward trajectory going forward. Like, that's how big this 12-team playoff can be. These fan bases, there's more interest created for Arizona State football, for Indiana football. Boise's had a lot of interest for a while now because of how good they've been for so long. But Indiana football and Arizona State football, the amount of interest created for those two teams going forward because they made a 12-team playoff, they lost, whatever. Like, that's going to help them more going forward, and that's how big this truly can be for other teams like that. Like next year, we might have a couple of other teams that come out of nowhere and make this 12-team playoff. That could help them a lot going forward.
Yeah, we've always said it's just going to give those teams seeded 5 through 8, right, in the current format, Penn State, Texas, Notre Dame, Ohio State, that many more mulligans for the big brands.
It's going to give the teams with the most talent, like Ohio State. Yeah.
But the true Cinderellas, I mean, like in Arizona State, I think this game showed that it can happen in the right situation. Is it more than likely to happen than not? No, but it can happen. And I think when it does, eventually it will happen. And when it does, it'll be just that much sweeter. The sport will be better off for it. For one of these, I mean, I think if we're talking about an Arizona State versus Ohio State matchup right now, like on paper, it's not an exciting matchup, but shoot, we got Kenny Dillingham going in there. We got another game of Scatterbo. Like, that'd be fun to talk about. Like, that stuff's fun to talk about during March Madness.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Valiant effort by the Sun Devils. Texas gets to move on. They get a tasty treat going home and playing in the Cotton Bowl. How about that? Texas gets to play in Atlanta, and they get to play in Austin. Then they get to play in Atlanta, and they get to play in Dallas, and they may get to play back in Atlanta for the national championship.
That's wild, man. And I wanted to mention just one last thing about the game. We talk about the transfer portal. Obviously, Texas has utilized it well. And going into the year, everybody thought that it was going to be the Isaiah Bond show and some of these other guys. And lo and behold, their best receiver is Matthew Golden, the transfer from Houston. 7 catches for 149. That's 21.3 yards a pop in this game. Yeah. And I wanted to say it one more time for the amount of crap that Quinn Ewers does get. I know that there were times in this game where it just seemed like, once again, you're watching the game just wanting more from him. In the biggest moments in this game, in the biggest moments of his career so far at Texas, and he's been in some big ones, he saved Texas this season and really saved Sark in Texas from a major embarrassment from losing this game. Like, think about the nuts that it took on that touchdown pass that he made, dude, in the back of the end zone on that 4th down. Think about what everybody's saying about him and about Texas in general right now if they don't make that play. Just, I wanted to point that out because I know we do it as well. A lot of people get on him, and he made some big time plays there in the second half and in the fourth quarter when it mattered the most.
The granddaddy of them all, the Rose Bowl. A lot of people are saying this was going to possibly be the national championship. And if it was, my goodness, the Ohio State Buckeyes, ever since playing their rival Michigan, have just been on an absolute tear. Whatever they did, whatever they changed since November 30th, it's definitely working for them. And they need to keep that up. They built up a 34-0 lead over the Oregon Ducks. They ended with they nearly doubled them up in total yardage. Will Howard, again, we didn't know if it could be duplicated, that Tennessee game, and it turns out we were wrong. Like, it could be duplicated. That was unbelievable, that first half. The first quarter again. I don't think it's too far stretched to say Jeremiah Smith might be the best player in college football, period.
Yeah.
He's absolutely uncoverable. It is unreal to be 19 years old and to look like he does and to be that good on such a big stage.
To move like that at his size is just unbelievable. And I've seen the NFL like scouts and the people that cover the NFL were talking about the draft and said that he would be wide receiver 1 right now for approximately 20 teams in the NFL.
Yeah.
And that's not a joke.
Yeah.
That's not a joke. And let's start here. I'm sorry. I mean, even Ryan Day talked about it in the post, so we're going to go there. Think about the absolute mental pretzel that Michigan has to have Ryan Day and Ohio State in for them to go the entire season trying to pound the ball between the guards and just run into a brick wall over and over and over again with their running backs, not opening up the offense. Like, I know that Jeremiah Smith caught passes this year and scored some touchdowns, but to really just unleash all of these skilled freak athletes in space that nobody else in college football has like they do, it took until them losing to Michigan for them to do this. Think about the mental pretzel that Michigan really had them in for them to not do this until after they lost that game. Amazing. But either way, that's behind them, and they've literally gone out in these 2 games. And you and I were talking about this the other day with a buddy in our text message, in a little group text, and it's not a hyperbole to say this. They are the most talented football team. I don't even think it's close. They're the most talented football team since the 2019 LSU team. I'm not saying they're the best team. They may be. I mean, they got to finish it off here. We got 2 more games to go. But talent-wise, as far as a collection of talent on the field at one time, Ohio State has the most talent of any team in college football since the 2019 LSU team.
Yeah.
And, like, I know it's easy to get caught up in Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka and Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins and Will Howard and all of that stuff that the offense is doing right now. But this team is a bunch of dogs on defense. Oregon. Yeah. Think about who we're talking about here. Oregon. With all of the weapons that they have, dude, nobody could get open. They couldn't run the ball. They literally looked like a bad high school team at one point compared to Ohio State. That's what we're talking about here. And Oregon, and I'm not trying to take anything away from Oregon.
I keep laughing about it because it's just unbelievable.
It really is. It really is. Oregon is elite, a great team with amazing athletes, so much speed. And they could not get open, bro. It was unbelievable. Dude, they couldn't block.
Yeah, they had 8 sacks.
Mm-hmm.
They had negative 23 yards rushing for the game.
13 tackles for a loss, man. Like I know, like I'm not trying to.
We've been waiting forever to see Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau and all those guys just tear up a team. And now we did not think it was going to be the number 1 team in the country. And
yeah, like Tyleik Williams, big man in the middle too. Like, dude, they've got some grown ass men on that defensive front. And then, lo and behold, you go from that, and then their middle linebacker, Cody Simon, looks like the best linebacker in college football. all of a sudden. I mean, again, I know he's been really good for them, but like he's really shining now. And then behind that, you got Ransom and Caleb Downs. it's nuts.
Yeah.
It just reiterates again what we said after the Tennessee game, bro. If they play their A game, nobody's beating them.
Yeah.
And not only are you not beating them, you're not coming close.
Yeah.
If
I'm not sounding like a homer at all, but the one team that has the best chance to do it is Notre Dame because they play most like Michigan out of these teams left.
Yeah, they could line up at the line of scrimmage and withstand it. And again, no, this is going to sound crazy because they haven't beat them in forever. But like at least Penn State knows what to expect going up against Ohio State. Like they've been in the trenches with them, and they know what that's like. Like, and then that game in Happy Valley was a close game. I know the game in Oregon was also a close game, and that was not even remotely close in this Rose Bowl. But I mean, just to sum it all up, Ohio State ran the ball well. They had explosive runs. The offensive line out of nowhere has decided that now they can block and they can run block. But hey, guess what? Run blocking's a lot easier when the defense has to cover the entire width and the entire length of the field because they're literally shitting their pants on defense, hoping you don't throw the ball to Jeremiah Smith or Emeka Egbuka or get the ball to these athletes in space. Just incredible.
Contrary to popular belief, the passing game can open up the running game. Everybody always talks about the running game open up the passing game. The passing game is just as well to do that. It's just when people say that, it blows my mind. On the defensive side of the ball, we've said it for how many years? Jim Knowles, best defensive coordinator in the country by far.
He is.
I texted you this 4-2-5 that they've been running against Tennessee and Oregon. It's like a hybrid 4-2-5 because they're putting 3 safeties on the field and just putting them back there because they know that their front 6 and then the corners on the edge, but their front 6 can withstand and they can stop your run. And when they can do that, you've got 3 guys back there with Caleb Downs and Latham Ransom. Like you're not going to be able to do anything on them in the pass game because they're going to beat your 5 offensive linemen.
And Downs and
the wrinkles
Ransom
he throws in is unbelievable.
And I know we're not the X's and O's podcast, but like it doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure this out. Downs and Ransom are both so good and such good athletes at the safety position. They can come down in the box to help out on the run game and then adjust and get back into coverage in the passing game. They're good enough in coverage that they can do that. And also they're so good that if they are back, they see the run so well. Dude, there were multiple times. There was one time, man, Noah Whittington got up. The announcers didn't say anything about it. But Ransom came in and just popped Noah Whittington on just a normal like run play. Whittington gained like 6 yards he worked his butt off to get those 6 yards. While he was fighting for extra yards, Ransom comes in and just delivers a freaking blow to him. Whittington gets up and looks over the sidelines like this. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, your starting running back's already been knocked out of the game. Your offensive line's seeing ghosts. And now flipping this, you know my affinity for Dan Lanning. I love me some Dan Lanning. It's not a secret that him and Kenny Dillingham, they're boys, they're friends, they coach together. The way that they handle themselves in press conferences, the way that they just literally never make excuses. Like after the game, Dan Lanning, somebody mentioned something about Evan Stewart getting knocked out, which is unbelievable that he got hurt in pregame.
Yeah.
And they're talking about the bot. He cut him off and was like, guys, I don't care. All that stuff you're saying, all those are excuses. We got flat out whipped here tonight. It just wasn't our night. And some people thought that he was throwing a shot at Ohio State by saying it wasn't their night at Michigan. No, he was just making a point that like, yeah, this team you saw out here tonight, this Ohio State team, that's not the same team that showed up against Michigan a few weeks ago. Like right now, it wasn't our night. It was theirs. A little bit of a joke here that's not really a joke. Phil Knight is sitting around right now looking around the country and going, okay,
I was just going to say
which large humans can I find to pay as much money as possible to come play on the defensive line and the offensive line that we can just stack them in waves?
Yeah.
Because I can promise you, Dan Lanning coached at Georgia. He knows and stuff too, that's where the game is won. At the end of the day, Oregon did have a really good line of scrimmage this year, but to win a national championship, what you just saw against Ohio State, even Jeff Schwartz said this, they're still a ways away from winning it all at the line of scrimmage. They've got to get better at the line of scrimmage overall, and I think they will.
Yeah, I think they'll keep building. I think Dan Lanning, this is only going to, light his fire even more. I think he's going to keep building. They're just like Georgia. Oregon's not going away. They'll be just fine in the Big Ten next year.
Yep.
But Ohio State, big one against Texas, going down to the Cotton Bowl next Friday night.
I can't wait to break that one down.
That should be a good one. We'll be back on Monday to break that one down per usual. But let's talk one more game, man. What happened on New Year's Eve down in the desert? Fiesta Bowl. Penn State comes out with a 31-14 victory over Boise State. But that's one of those games where it's a lot closer than the margin looks like. Penn State, again, jumped out. Early lead. Boise State kind of looking lackadaisical a little bit. Maybe they were feeling the bye week. They weren't up to the game speed. Obviously, they're taking a step up in competition playing Penn State. So maybe, it took them a little longer to get up to the game speed, but they eventually did. And Ashton Genty did his thing. I've been seeing, highlights and clips of him, and you called him in. I don't think Always Talking Ball could have predicted this game and told people what this game was going to be better than what you did on our game previews. And Ashton Genty, again, tons of yards after contact because the Boise State offensive line was, again, underwhelming all freaking night, even when Abdul Carter went out for Penn State. They were all over that offensive line.
And it's not a knock against Boise's O-line, man. They just they don't. I mean, it doesn't take a brain surgeon again to figure they don't see defensive lines like Penn State's in the Mountain West. They just don't.
Yeah.
And
but
go ahead.
He still topped 100 yards.
Yeah.
Maddox Madsen, 304 yards. A couple costly turnovers there. But again, you said you thought Allen and Singleton would have great games. And they did. Each of them.
The physical match at the line of scrimmage was going to be too much for Boise. It just was. And Boise was like literally going into the game, they were second in the country in sacks. We talked about that. I talked about my boy Ahmed Hassanein, and he ended up showing out. And made a big name for himself. That's a guy that's probably going to get drafted. You're going to be looking in the NFL years from now, and he's going to be some All-Pro probably somewhere because he outworks everybody else and just has more heart than anybody. And he happens to be 6'5", 270 pounds. But Boise can get after you in the passing game as far as getting after the quarterback. Both of their ends can really put some pressure on the quarterback, and they did in this game. But Penn State with those two backs and that offensive line, if I'm honestly my biggest critique of this game, a critic of Penn State, as much as I've talked about my boy Andy Kotelnicki all year and how much I liked him, he didn't run Katron Allen enough. He didn't. This should have been one of those deals where you looked up, and I know Allen had a big night. I think I've got it right here. He had 17 carries for 134 yards. He should have had 25 carries. Like, he really should have.
Yeah.
Like, there was times in this game where you're just watching, you're like, what are they doing? Like, doing some of that cute crap that they try to do sometimes or whatever. You don't need to – there's times you might need to pull that out. When they were pulling it out against USC earlier this year, trying to get back in that game, the stuff they were doing with Tyler Warren in an offensive shootout, absolutely. But when you are the most physically dominant team on the field by a lot and running the football is working, run the damn ball. And, yeah, Allen and Singleton were really good in this game. And Boise just did not have an answer at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. At one point, like you said, Penn State was keeping them in it. Boise was doing that little engine that could type stuff that they're so known for doing in these big time matchups. Maddox Madsen was dealing and making some good throws, but the turnovers, man, were just backbreakers. They just were.
Yeah, 4 turnovers in the game for Boise to 1 for Penn State. Boise had 13 penalties. It was the third of the 4 games where the losing team outgained the winning team. But penalties and turnovers mean a lot in this game. And
4 turnovers and 90 yards in penalties.
Yeah, you just can't afford it when you're already undermatched like that. It's the same with Arizona State. You can't afford the turnovers. You can't afford to dig yourself into an early hole. And Boise State, again, special teams too, missed 2 field goals. They had a chance to cut this to a 7-point game, right, with about 6 minutes to go,
Yep.
and missed a field goal, and that was all she wrote. And Nick Singleton busted off a 58-yard touchdown run, and that was just kind of it. And
yeah, and in regards to Penn State, man, again, they've got the ingredients. They've got it there, man. They really do. Their corners, their pass rushers, their defensive line in general, those positions on their defense are really freaking good. And NFL players all over the place at those positions. If they could just somehow figure it out on offense, I just think eventually the receiver position is probably going to cost them. But still, the running game with Allen and Singleton, Tyler Warren might be the second best player in this playoff behind Jeremiah Smith, like overall best player. He's a mismatch nightmare. They're just times when you watch them play, man, that they look like that they could do it, that they can beat anybody. And then there's times when you watch them that you're sitting here and you're going, yeah, I can see why this game is a 6.7, almost a 7-point game with Boise. They're not just stepping on the throat and putting them away.
yeah,
But again, overall, I just think that Penn State early on was leaving a lot to be desired. But I know Boise made mistakes. Turnovers are a part of it. Penn State applying pressure like they do, corners being draped all over the receivers like they were a lot of the reasons why Maddox Matson was throwing interceptions. It wasn't because necessarily he just stinks or he's making bad throws. It just people aren't open and he's getting pressured. So sometimes you got to try to make a play because the running game wasn't there.
yeah. I mean, Boise offensive line struggled. You can't start slow, like we talked about. Missed the field goal, then Ashton Genty fumbles. You can't spot Penn State a 14-point lead like that. Penn State just has more athletes, more dudes on the field than the Group of 5 program that made it into the playoff, and that's just kind of really all that's said at this game. It happened on New Year's Eve, so hopefully you got to tune into it. Before we head out of here, man, we're going to break these games down on our next episode, but quick thoughts just off the top of the head. Let's start first with the Cotton Bowl. Just give me, quick 1 to 2 minute thoughts on the Cotton Bowl between Texas and Ohio State.
Well, the first 2 games with Ohio State, they've really overwhelmed people at the line of scrimmage with their defensive front. Texas not being able to run the football against Arizona State, obviously, gives you some pause and a lot of concern. But Texas has been on the field in a heat of battle with Georgia and against their defensive fronts. And I know that Ohio State's is probably better, but still, they've been in the heat of battle against some good defensive fronts this year. I don't expect – I know a lot of people probably think this is the way Ohio State's played these 2 weeks. This is going to be a blowout. I don't necessarily think that. My biggest concern would be the lack of mobility for Quinn Ewers. With the way that Ohio State is just heating up quarterbacks right now. I mean, the Tennessee game and the Oregon game, I mean, dude, there were Buckeyes living in the backfield the whole game. So Sark's a really good offensive mind. He's going to have to figure out some way to negate that relentless pass rush. And nobody does a better job in college football of running an offensive scheme like Sark does in regards to thinking you're going one way and it counters the other way. The screen game is a huge part of Texas's offensive game because they try to keep you as a defense on your heels. They don't want you being in attack mode. So be interesting to see the cat and mouse game there between Sark and Jim Knowles. And I know that Texas gave up a lot of passing yards against Clemson, and that's been Texas's. It looks like their Achilles heel when they play the best passing offenses. That looks to be a problem for them. But they do have the guy that won the Best Defensive Back of the Year award. They've got some solid corners. Bear and Imakuba are both really good corners for them. They're one or two things. They're either great elite corners or they've just been a product of not facing that many good passing offenses. We obviously going to find out with Emeka Egbuka and Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith in that crew. But I do think Texas can hold up on the line of scrimmage against them, and I do think Texas's defensive front can cause some problems.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a tall task for Texas.
It is.
Very tall task. And underlying storyline here is a lot of these dudes on this defense who are 4th and 5th year guys. Who did they start off their college career at Ohio State with as their quarterback?
Well, it wasn't their quarterback, but he was there on the roster, yes.
He was there on the roster, and he bounced on him. And, whether or not you want to make some of that, they are going to make something of that. And they're going to want to make his life a living hell. And I just think the way they shut down Oregon's offense and those receivers, we've talked about Matthew Golden being their best receiver, Isaiah Bond you got to think the Oregon skill position players are more talented than Texas. And the way that Texas could not run the ball against Arizona State has got to be scaring Texas fans right now going up against Ohio State, who just held Oregon to negative 23 yards rushing. So I think it's going to be a tough one for Texas.
Yeah, and I know we're going to talk more about it, but it's just flat out, dude. It comes down to Texas has to be able to run the football.
Yeah,
that's just all there is to it. Again, look at Texas's games the last few years. When they run the football well, they win. When they don't run the football well, they either lose or they're in a game like they were against a much superior opponent, a much inferior opponent like Arizona State was to them, that if they're not running the football well, they have a chance to lose.
Yeah. And then on the other side of the bracket, down in Miami, the Orange Bowl taking place a week from tonight, January 9th. So we got more Thursday Night Football coming up next week. Initial thoughts are, on paper, I think we kind of talked about it a little bit. The Penn State offense should be more challenging to the Notre Dame defense than the Georgia offense was. But, what wide receiver is going to test Notre Dame's secondary? It's not going to be a wide receiver. It's going to be a tight end. So it's going to be interesting to see what Al Golden does to try to lock down Tyler Warren. And Singleton and Allen are very good running backs. We know Notre Dame is really good at stopping the run. So that's going to be interesting on that side of the ball. Obviously, on the other side, it's kind of like the same story, right? Like, who's going to be scaring, Penn State's secondary? Basically, it's going to come down to who's going to be the better quarterback in the game. Who do you trust more, Riley Leonard or Drew Aller?
Yep.
So
I agree. I think that both defensive lines will control the game. I think that obviously the health of this will be one of those random, but Xavier Watts, what's the health of him like? Because didn't he get kind of nicked up there at the end of that game?
Yeah, he came back in.
He did? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, obviously I think they're going to match him up some with Tyler Warren. But again, they put Tyler Warren in so many different places along that. They put him in the backfield. They line him up in the slot. They line him up at wide receiver. Line him up at quarterback. Line him up at center. Yeah, it's not going to be a deal where you can just they try to create mismatches with him. So yeah, how they match up with him, how they handle. Again, we've seen nothing from Notre Dame that tells us that they're not going to be able to hold up against the run. So. I don't know that Katron Allen and Nick Singleton are going to be able just to run the ball all over Notre Dame. So I think it's going to come down to, again, kind of like this Georgia game did with Notre Dame. Who makes the mistakes? Who turns the football over? Who can possibly get a non-offensive touchdown like a kickoff return like Notre Dame did? Penn State and the SMU game and the Boise game forced multiple turnovers. Penn State's plus $1 billion in this playoffs in the turnover margin.
Yeah.
In the SMU game and the Boise game. So if they continue that, they're going to win. But I can't wait to break both of these down, man. And I have to hit our boy up, Matt Massaros, because he gave some good insight, too, on old Katron Allen as well. I think he had some, prop about Katron Allen, over carries and yards and all that. And I'm pretty sure that cash for him. So, man, looking forward to both of these games.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to break those down. That's it for us tonight. We covered a lot. We covered all the big bowl games. It was a fun New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. Don't worry, buddy. The SEC will be just fine. You guys are a basketball conference now, so you'll be just fine.
Hey, I almost tweeted out from our pod. I said, 2020 in the year of our Lord, 2024, Indiana was a football state and Alabama was a basketball state.
Unreal. No lies told here on ATB. We appreciate you guys for tuning in. Tune into our socials, all that stuff. Follow us on Spotify, at Apple, and YouTube. But we're getting a lot of views on the videos on YouTube, so we appreciate you guys for that. Keep liking and subscribing and following. And enjoy the weekend. We'll be back on Monday with our CFP semifinals preview show.